should you say, a checklist at the back of your mind. Whenever you go to the classroom, this should be there lingering in your mind when you're interacting with the students, when you're planning your instruction for the class, when you have your course design, when you're doing your course design at the beginning of the semester. So the idea is to put certain things in your mind so that these will act as a check for you whenever you're doing. And some of the things, of course, it is better to know but not always implementable. But it depends how you can take this theory, you can customize it for the particular set of students you're dealing with. I won't say all the things can be implemented, okay? Depending upon the complexity of the subject you're handling, depending upon the level of the learners, depending upon the time available. There are so many constraints when we actually go to the ground, okay? Theory can be very ideal, but sometimes not knowing it can also be dangerous. If you don't know it, then you commit certain follies which can be avoided. So that's the whole goal of giving you these theoretical inputs on engineering pedagogy. So today my session is Ade. So I made the slides very elegant actually. I chose a wonderful font, but for some reason the font has come out like this. I chose a very beautiful font, but I feel sad that it has come out so it looks so much in the face. But I hope you'll mind with me. This was not the original font I selected. It may be too much in the face, but I think you can excuse me for that. So yes, our today's session is again on learning and learning styles. So when we say learning, last 2-3 days you have been discussing these things. Yesterday also, Mr. Sitaram Anjaneyulu was speaking about Bloom's taxonomy, learning outcomes, graduate attributes. So when you talk about learning, what exactly do you mean? So let us look. Today's the whole perspective I want you to get is about from the student side. Okay, whatever for 1 hour, 15 minutes, whatever I'm going to speak will be more from the student side. If we can understand what are the student needs, I think that will make us a better teacher. So when we say learning, what exactly do we mean? It's a very abstract word, but I want you to take some guesses. When we say learning, yesterday Mr. Sitaram Anjaneyulu was talking about Bloom's taxonomy. He was talking about learning outcomes. So what do we mean by the word learning? When you say someone is learning something or someone has learned something, what exactly do we mean? Yes? Okay, knowing something. So when we say learning, we say they know something. So, yes? Understanding something. Okay. Okay. Learning means knowing, understanding. For what? Yes? Practicing a skill. So he said no, that means knowledge. Learning involves acquiring some knowledge. And another gentleman says it means skill, acquiring a skill. Learning means gaining knowledge, acquiring knowledge. Learning also means acquiring a skill. Fine. And anything more you would like to add to that? Both are right. But learning is something more than that. Yes? Yesterday when you were discussing Bloom's taxonomy, and when you were discussing learning outcome, I think Mr. Sitaram Anjaneyulu would have spoken about behavior. Did he mention the word behavior? Bloom's taxonomy is categorizing, giving some hierarchy of learning objectives, isn't it? Starting with the base of the pyramid, what is the first one? It is, yes, remembrance. Remembrance means knowing something and ability to recall. Second step is, yes, comprehension, understanding something. Third step is applying. If you have learn something, you should be able to recall it. If you can recall it, you should be able to understand it. If you are able to understand it, you should be able to apply it. Then analyze. You should also be able to analyze. You should, if you're given a problem, you should be able to analyze what the problem is, and you should be able to apply your knowledge and skill to get some solution. Then what is the next level? Yes, evaluation. That what does evaluation mean? Evaluation means using your judgment. See, you have, for instance, if you have two models in front of you, let's say you are trying to buy a new machine. So, as an engineer, you are asked to make some recommendation. You are in the sales department. You are asked to get the quotation for the two machines, and you will have to make the recommendations to the organization. Machine A is better than machine B. So you have to use your judgment. You have to examine the technical merits of the two machines, the costing, the service part. Would it require too frequent a service? Weigh the two machines in terms of the features and then benefits, and then you have to use your judgment. Looking at the two models, you should say machine A is better than machine B. I would recommend you to purchase it for these reasons. Or for solving this problem, this particular method is suitable when compared to this method for these reasons. So you are applying some judgment. You will apply your evaluation skills. When you are, this is the next level. You have to not only know it, you have to apply it, you have to analyze while providing solution. You should also be able to discern between what is better when you are making your recommendation. All this is involved in the professional life of an engineer. Then the final stage is creation. Bloom's taxonomy was revised by another educationist, psychologist called Anderson. Previously it was called synthesis, but Anderson said creation. He said that if you can synthesize, you should come out with some innovation, and you should be able to create something new out of the knowledge, skills, okay, that you have acquired. So that is at the apex of the pyramid. So these are the different outcomes expected out of learning. And what are these called? All these things that we discussed: recalling, applying, comprehending, applying, analyzing, synthesizing. What are these? Irrespective of what subject we learn, what do we call these? These are behaviors. So educationists say that they are behaviors. That means you have, after acquiring the analytical skill, and I think or for that matter, you can think for yourself. An engineer completes his MTech in machine design and then goes to become a civil servant. There he is going to he's going to look after the village development or a particular, okay, he's allotted to a certain area. But he is not going to do a mechanical engineer's job. But then he has acquired these behaviors, these attributes, these qualities, the graduate attributes yesterday Mr. Sitaram Anjanelu was talking about. These graduate attributes are transferable skills. Whichever job they go to, you are only using the subject as a scaffold or as a prop or as a ladder to acquire some skills. And engineers, by virtue of the subjects they study, they are more prone to having analytical and application skills than non-technical graduates. So that's why if you see these days, whether it be civil services, whether it be banking sector, for all kinds of jobs, okay, mostly you will find engineers bagging them. Because when you go for a competitive exam, the aptitude testing, okay, is done to see whether the candidates have these skills. Whatever, you may not be doing only a hardcore technical job. Your skill may be used anywhere else. If you go to Kashmir as a special officer after, okay, getting selected in UPSC, clearing the IAS exam, you will be required to provide a solution to the India-Pakistan problem if possible. Solve the Kashmir territorial dispute. But you are a mechanical engineer working on a social problem or on a political problem, whatever. but then you have the skills. These skills are transferable, okay? Irrespective of which domain you come from, if you have the skill, those skills can be applied in any domain of activity. So that is why Bloom's taxonomy says that these are learning behaviors. If you have learned, then these are the behaviors you acquire. These are the skills. These are the outcomes. An engineer has a better analytical ability. An engineer has a better ability to synthesize and create new things. He can think more innovatively. So we call them as, these learning outcomes are called as behaviors. So that's why when we say learning, we mean all these things. We mean acquiring new knowledge. We mean, what else we mean? Acquiring new skills. And we also mean applying them in any kind of situation. So when you say learning, it is more an outcome as well. It is both an outcome as well as a process. So, is it an outcome or a process? So, is learning something that happens after you have gone through the 4-year program or after you have studied a course? What the end result, is that an outcome or a process? It is both. We say that learning is both. When you're going in a gradient way, okay, you are learning the knowledge of the subject, but in the pursuit of the knowledge of that subject, you are also acquiring skills. When you're learning mechanical engineer, when you're doing machine design, you're also getting skills in the process. The skills are, what are the skills? Analytical skills, design skills. Design involves creation, isn't it? You're acquiring skills. So in that sense, when you say learning, learning is both a process as well as an outcome. What goes on in the process is equally important as what is the end result of that process. Both are important. So we must bear this in mind when we go to the class as a teacher. Most of us are concerned only about the outcome, producing good grades, getting highest pass percentage in my subject, to see that none of my students fail. For many of us, that is the priority goal. But it is also the process, the day-to-day experience you give to the student in the classroom. That is also important. Only then the end result will be the expected one that you desire. I hope you are able to appreciate this point. So how does learning happen? How does learning happen? Let's reflect on it for a minute. How does learning happen? It's a very abstract question, but yeah. Okay, learning can happen if you are instructed or if you yourself start your preparation. Okay, good. Yes? Observation, experience, excellent. Through observation, through experience. If somebody coaches us or trains us or instructs us through books, through self-study, through all these channels, learning can happen. So does learning require an environment? Yes? Why does it require an environment? Yes. For concentration, okay, so that you have focus. Okay, let's say I am going in a bus. I am going in the college bus back to Guntur. On the way, 2 people are sitting in the front seat. They are conversing about the Afghanistan issue. One of the persons has read the morning newspaper and after reading he is sharing what he read about the Afghan problem to his partner, to whoever is sitting beside him. And I am sitting in the back seat and I am overhearing the conversation. So I didn't know about the Afghan issue previously. I am not a person who regularly reads the newspapers, say. Let's suppose I don't read the newspapers regularly and I am not updated on what is happening in the Asian continent, in our own backyard. But the 2 people speaking about the issue, I just heard what they were speaking unintentionally. I did not intend to learn, but I picked up some useful things about the Afghan issue. That USA has withdrawn the troops from Afghanistan or is planning to withdraw, and it may lead to again tribal warfare, and again the whole situation may become chaotic. So if there is no UN troops and USA to keep an eye, again the Taliban may take over. So these are the things I picked up. Here bits and snatches, but I came to know, okay, from the two speakers or people who were conversing in the front seat. So there was no environment. I was just sitting there, but I learned about the Afghanistan issue. So do we say that we need environment? Okay, not always. We don't need an environment always. But then can we do away with the environment? Then why do we have this room? We have a hall with a particular attention paid to the ambience. When you go to the classroom, you have a board, you have a ICT, you have an LCD, you have a chalk, you have a piece. The teacher is standing on this side, the students are sitting on that side. All of them are focusing their attention on the blackboard. Isn't that environment? Yes. So, do we need an environment or not? Yes, we do need an environment. Learning can happen even without an environment. Okay, environment can be controlled, created for the specific purpose of teaching and learning, or environment can be the natural environment. Environment, when I was traveling in the bus, that is my natural environment. Okay, so we learn when there is some stimulus from outside or from inside. So learning can happen in an environment which may be natural or which may be a controlled environment, like we are sitting in this room. All of you are expected to be here in this hall by 2 o'clock. And the speaker is supposed to start the session by 2:15. 2 to 2:15 there is going to be a review of the previous day's session. There is a schedule, there is an environment, there is an expectation set, isn't it? So, learning happens in an environment, but learning can also be without environment, in the sense it need not be controlled always. We learn lot of things from our natural environment, but that is incidental. That may or may not happen. Let's say the two people who were sitting before me were talking about Afghanistan issue. I was not paying attention to them. I was happily with my iPod I was listening, I put plugs in my ear and I was listening to some music. So though there is something happening in my background where I could have learned, I didn't pay attention to it. It's incidental. The fact that I didn't put something in my ear and I was overhearing the conversation made me learn about the Afghanistan issue. That is accidental, that is unintentional, that is only incidental. But in a classroom, we don't leave that to chance. We can't leave anything to chance. The whole ambience, the physical environment, the classroom dynamics are everything controlled, and the teacher is the manager, the classroom manager, isn't it? When the teacher is there in the classroom, okay, the teacher is the person who sets the ground rules. The other day, Mr. Nagaraju was saying, you give clear instructions to your students, lay down some ground rules. What are the do's and don'ts in your class? What do you expect the students to do while you are teaching? After completing your teaching, what is it that you expect from the students? What do you expect the students to come with in the first 5 minutes of the next class for the follow-up session? All these ground rules will be laid down by the teacher. The teacher will make them very explicit. The teacher will not leave it to the students' intelligence or judgment. The teacher sets clear ground rules and clear explicit, expectations. And then the teacher will expect certain things, certain results. So when we say that the environment, we mean that the environment is a conditioned environment. There is something being created to make something happen. And what is it that we are all trying to make happen? The learning. We are designing the room, including the acoustics, including the sunlight, including the furniture, The furniture also is meant for the comfort, so that the students can sit for long hours and without any physical discomfort listen to the teacher. So all these are designed and assembled, put together to make something happen. These are the factors which create conducive environment for the learning to happen. So we do need an environment, and environment is controlled environment. Environment is controlled by the teacher. You may have all the latest infrastructure, the best ambience, physical ambience I mean. But if the teacher does not know how to manage it, the class can be very chaotic and it can be self-defeating. No learning will happen. So, yes, we do require an environment. An environment has to be created in such a way that it contributes to the learning. Then comes the questions. Let us reflect for a minute. Who are our learners? You are all teaching students, BTech students at various levels. Some may be teaching first years, some may be teaching second years, third years or fourth year students. So who are our learners? What is the profile of our learners? Yes, how do we look at our learners? I want you to answer that question. Please try. What is the profile of our learners? Who are our learners? Mr. Nagaraju was also saying, yesterday Mr. Sitaram Anjanil was also saying, know your learners first. Yes, who are our learners? Students, fine, but who are they? Okay, are they children or are they adults? Let me make it clear. When I say a broad blanket statement, you are not able to understand. Are they children or are they adults? Yes? What do you think they are? Please think very carefully. When you answer this question, I want you to give it serious thought, because that determines your whole style of teaching in the classroom. Adults with childish behavior. Okay, that's a self-contradictory statement. Fine, okay. Adults and childish. Okay, fine. What about, yes? Okay, he says they are in a transition phase. Okay, from teenage or adolescent to adulthood. Okay. Anybody else wants to share their views? How do you look at your learners when you go to the classroom? This is a very, very important thing. We don't give it enough thought, but please think carefully about this question. Yes? Children, absolutely clear about that. You all think they are children. Yes? Yes?
They are the students who acquire the prerequisite knowledge to understand the subject which we are going to give.
Okay. But I want you to talk in terms of the age and the profile, and that part we'll discuss later. Do you think they are children or do you think they are adults? What I'm going to speak about next is related to that. That's why I want to understand what is your approach to your students. They are siblings, okay. He's very, very kind. He treats them as family, yes. Okay, they are laymen. They have no previous knowledge about the subject. Okay, that is his approach. And beginners, okay. But I don't want to give you so many options. I want to give you only two options. Option A or B. Children or adults? Yes? How many of you think they are children? Okay, sizable number. How many of you think they are adults? A minority, but yeah, quite a, still there are. I am encouraged by the, okay, second response, that okay, fair number of you think they are. So let's look at it. Okay, are they children or adults? If they are children, why would they want to learn? If they are adults, why would they want to learn? Let's examine that. Okay, first those people who said they are children, you think they are children, I want them to answer. If you think they are children, why would they want to learn? What is their goal and what is their objective in coming to the class and sitting for 8 hours in the college, in the classrooms? He says a child is very curious and enthusiastic and always is eager to learn new things. That's why they want to learn. How many of you agree with him? Please raise your hands. He says children are very eager to learn. I don't know, my experience tells me otherwise, but still, okay, he has made a, yes. So most of you think they are very eager and very enthusiastic to learn. When you say, come on, we are going to do machine design and thermodynamics 1, they will all jump with enthusiasm. Is that how you get the response? No, then? Okay, they are curious to learn new things, but are they curious to learn what you are going to teach them? That's what you give them a computer game, you give them a computer or a iPod or iPad, they would love it. No doubt about that. But are they curious to learn thermodynamics 1 and engineering mechanics and circuit theory? Do they show so much energy and drive when they come to your class? I'm curious to know, tell me. 50% are curious. Okay. Any more responses? Please answer. I want you to think. Okay. He says how we teach them, how we put across the knowledge, and how we make them perceive what we are teaching. Okay. Good response. Anything more? Anybody else wants to add? Okay, depends on the speaker, how he creates or generates interest in the learners towards the subject. So how do you create that? Huh? Okay. Okay, the teacher himself shows lot of passion for the subject he is teaching. Yes, I agree with him. If you are on fire, okay, and you show lot of passion when you are teaching the subject, that will be transmitted, okay, that will be very contagious and the students will also catch that and they will also show interest. Okay, fine. And what else? We are speaking about children, mind you. All these things are being discussed about children, not about adults. So let's qualify that statement. So children are very fired and they always are full of passion to learn even complex subjects. Fine, okay. Then what about the second school of thinkers who say that I treat my students as adults? What do you think? Yes. They are more competitive, okay. Because they are competitive and motivated, that's why they want to learn. Fair enough? Okay. I'll go with his statement. Because they have an objective, they are goal oriented, they have an objective, that's why they want to learn. Fair enough? Okay, they know that getting a BTech degree is essential for their roti, kapda and makan. Okay, otherwise they'll be on the streets. So they better get the degree and get it fast in 4 years' time. Fine. So it's a minimum requirement, okay, for your livelihood. Fine. As functional as that, yes, we have even such students. They have no passion for the subject, but they want to get a degree to earn their livelihood. Perfectly practical, yes.
Real world, if you get everyone equal, like child is their parents will be taking care of us.
Okay.
Being adult, you will take yourself care and you will take others care also.
Okay.
Become in real world, they can grow.
So they want to become independent. That's what you mean. So they want to learn because that will give them a qualification, that will give them a, okay, they'll be able to fulfill the requirement to get a job and become independent. Fair enough? Any more responses? Respect. Excellent. So they want to, for social prestige, for personal prestige. Okay, how do they get it? By having a good career, by getting a good job, by working in big organizations, which gives them some identity. Some, fair enough, good. Yes. And anything else? Okay. So I was asking, do students learn? Are our learners only motivated by marks, exams, grades? Or is there more to it? Do students learn only for grades? Whether they are children or whether they are adults? We'll come to the children and adults part later again. I'll be returning to that question. We are not done with it yet. Okay? But whatever may be the level of the learners, do they learn only for marks, only for clearing exams, only for getting a qualification? Yes? Not exactly. Then what motivates them? Yes?
From 80% of people, or 80% of them, they learn that.
Okay, he says 80% of the student community is worried about grades and clearing exams and getting the degree in the right time. Fair enough, okay, very practical, yes. I think that's also true, I'll agree with him. 80% of the student community is like that. Okay, they don't care whether it is mechanical engineering or chemical engineering or IT. Okay, they are least bothered. They have no passion for engineering. They are only getting it as a degree for their, because it will be a passport to go to, okay, USA or go get into an MNC. That's a minimum requirement. Okay, fine, good. But then do they learn only for marks? Okay, even if that is the goal, larger goal, but is that enough to motivate them on a day-to-day basis? Will that keep them motivated on a day-to-day basis in the classroom? Do students, every minute of the 50 minutes you're teaching, do they think only about grades, only about exams, only about getting the BTech degree? No. I think none of us will think that they think only about marks. No, I don't think. Do you think so? Anybody here who thinks like that? So certainly marks, there's something more than marks which motivates them, something more than clearing exams. We have to first appreciate that point. As teachers, we cannot be cynical and we cannot dismiss the students saying that they are all the time worried only about marks. They don't want to learn anything beyond the textbook or beyond the syllabus or beyond what are the 5 important questions that are going to come in the next mid-exam paper. Okay, that would be very, very cynical outlook for a teacher to take. I don't think it is like that. Okay, even the most cynical teacher should not fall into that trap. Okay, of thinking that students only think about exams, only think about marks. Okay, that would be a very, very wrong approach. Okay, no, that our experience tells us that that is not the only thing that motivates students. Okay, if we think carefully, reflect on it. So, okay, now again coming back to the question. So I want to tell you, okay, because I don't have that debate about whether our engineering students are adults and or children could not be completed. And I don't want to go in that direction, okay? But I'm not saying it, okay? Education researchers are saying it, that students who have completed 18 years are adults. Every individual human being who has completed 18 years is an adult. Okay? So our basic presumption that they are children and not adults should be questioned. Okay, is that clear? Because they are getting the license to drive, they are getting the right to franchise, isn't it? So even the government of India also thinks they are adults, not only we. Okay, even if we like to categorize them as children, they are actually adults. Okay, that can be debated, of course. I'm not saying this is not a statement that everybody has to accept without qualification. But they are considered to be adults. And I would request all of you to believe that they are adults. Even if, for instance, if you want to say that, can you call yourselves adults? Okay, you want to say your students are not adults, they are childish, they are children, fine. But by the same parameters, can you all call yourselves adults? What do you mean by being adult? What do you mean by being adult? If that is also debatable, isn't it? Yes or no? Can we all claim that we are always 365 days, 24/7, we behave like adults? Yes or no? We will not go in that direction. This is not a philosophical or psychological, okay, discussion, but I'm just asking you to reflect on it. Okay? So anyway, education researchers say that students who are coming for undergraduation have completed 18 years are adults. And a teacher should be mindful of that. So if we are not mindful of that, then the basic presumption with which we plan our teaching and go to the classroom, okay, will be shaky, on shaky grounds. I won't say false, but then they say that, okay, all those students, okay, all the individuals who are coming and joining Vignan University on completion of 18 years are adults. And you have to believe that. You have to accept that. Okay? Then if you think they are adults, are you adopting methods that are suitable for adults? That is the next question. If we are supposed to treat them as adults, and if we think they are adults, then are we adopting methods of teaching that are suitable for adults, or are we still using methods that are suitable for children? Please reflect on your classroom experiences. How do you treat your students? Do you treat them like you are master and they are your subordinates and they are there to do your bidding? And you command them left, right, center? Or do you treat them like your equals? Do you treat them as your colleagues? Be honest to yourselves. Which of the two approaches you take? Yes? Second one. You treat them as your friends, as your colleagues. Yes? No, I don't think so. It's not so in everybody's case. Yes. Okay. With some distance. Okay. A friend and a guide. Good. I like that answer. What about the others? Yes. Relation between, okay, like two associates who are on the same job or who are undertaking the same task. Not like that. Okay, like a friend and an associate. Okay, fair enough. Friendly but not afraid. Okay, that's a nice statement. Good. Yes, that's a good relation. Yes. Okay, we try to create a congenial environment so that the student doesn't feel inhibited or intimidated by the teacher. Okay, the student doesn't feel threatened. Okay, he feels comfortable to open up and ask questions and interact with you on the subject or on any other. So please think on that. Please reflect on that question. Okay. Do you treat your students as adults or as children? If you treat them as adults, do you adopt methodologies that are suitable to teaching adults? That will make a whole lot of difference to the classroom dynamics. Please keep that in mind. So here, you can check this out, you can Google it. There's an education researcher, a psychologist called Malcolm Knowles, okay? In the 1970s, he was an American educationist and he has done lot of research. Okay, he has come out with theories on adult learning. Okay, so his theories, it is called as andragogy. We normally talk about pedagogy. Pedagogy means teaching. Ped means child. It's the Latin word meaning child. Okay? Like in pediatrics, pediatrician. Ped means child. So teaching a child is pedagogy. Andragogy is teaching adults. So Malcolm Knowles, an American educationist, has done extensive research. on adult learning. So if we are going to treat our students as adults, then our approach should be very different, because adults learn for a different kind, fulfilling different kind of needs. Their needs are very different from what children have when they come for exam. Like, okay, to reflect on the same question, children in schools, okay, why do they study? They study because their parents send them to school. Okay, why do they perform well in exams? Because to win the appreciation of a teacher, to win the appreciation of a mother or a father, or because the father promised a new bicycle if he stands class first. These are the incentives. Young children will not have very ambitious goals. They don't have long-term goals. They don't understand that I should do well in my science or math, or I should do well in my social studies because I can prepare for civil services when I am older, or I can become an engineer when I become 20 years old. Okay, they don't think like that. Children, for children the incentives are very short term. It is often to please the teacher, to please the mother or father that they learn. They are not aware of the larger goals of education, isn't it? But as some of you pointed out, they also learn to satisfy their curiosity to know things which they don't know. That is what the teacher should be able to do. But when you talk about education as a process, children have very different motives for learning new things. Not always only for gaining knowledge or to satisfy their curiosity. There may be other strong reasons why they learn. But adults are not like that. This is what Malcolm Knowles says. He has come out with 6 adult learning principles. Why do adults learn? They learn for these reasons. Adults don't need bribes. Adults don't need incentives like a bicycle if you stand class first. Of course, if you get 4 years consistently, you stand class topper, you will get a gold medal. In Ignan University, you will also get a full fee waiver if you are your branch topper. Scholarships are given, fee waivers are given. That may be one incentive, but for that people will not work so hard. Adults learn because they are internally motivated and they are self-directed. They are motivated, intrinsically motivated. They don't need external incentives. This is what adults, do when they come for learning. They want to learn because that they are planning to use that knowledge tomorrow in their professional world, out of which they can make a career and have a happy and comfortable life. They see that there is a purpose for learning. If they get some knowledge, new knowledge and new skills, they are going to put it to use. They are going to invent new things. Some people may do it. If you have a research bent of mind, you are not interested in the salary packet you are going to get as a researcher in DRDO or ISC Bangalore or Chandigarh or whatever, CSIR. You are going to learn because you have a natural burning curiosity to learn new things, invent new things. But that will be a small percentage, but nevertheless, adults learn because they are intrinsically motivated and they are self-directed. They don't like others to direct them, others to, control them. They hate it. That's what Knowles says. He has done extensive surveys, done lot of research, and he has crystallized these 6 principles. He says, adults. So, we are again talking about this from the perspective of the engineering students. That means if you are going to play the role of a master and always controlling the learning environment, students don't like it. Students may not always be happy with it. They may not complain, but they may not like it. They may not feel secure and they may not feel receptive to learning. I hope you are able to appreciate it. Adults bring life experiences and knowledge to learning experiences. So, some of you are saying, I'm very happy to hear those answers, that learning is a collaborative experience. Adults, like participation. When they come to the classroom, if the teacher allows them to participate, if the teacher is interactive, they enjoy it more. So, because they also have experiences. Sometimes students also, when you're teaching a concept, students can also contribute. Okay, students may also have done some, if a student has prepared for IIT and narrowly, okay, missed getting a seat into the IIT and he's sitting in your class in Vigyan University, you recognize him. He may be having more knowledge on the subject that you're teaching than the rest of the class. Ask him to contribute. Allow him to participate. So that's what Noel says. They bring their learning experiences, they bring a whole baggage of their own knowledge. Okay, tap into that. Tap into the reservoir of knowledge that the student brings, his experiences. Okay, you can enrich the classroom. Adults are goal-oriented. Adults are always seeking for an outcome, learning outcomes we were doing yesterday. They are outcome-oriented. Okay, they are goal-oriented. They expect something after the course. Okay, if I am learning Oracle, if I am doing Oracle DB2 certification on the campus, I should be able to join an IT industry and work on that platform. I can enhance my skills and I should get a job in the IT. So that is my goal. So they are goal oriented, they are relevancy oriented, they look for relevance. They don't like to simply learn things which have no concern or no relevance to their life and the career that they are going to pursue tomorrow. They will learn if they feel that there is going to be some use of that knowledge. Just for the sake of acquiring knowledge, okay, your students will not learn it. They are adults. Then adults are practical. Okay, they don't like abstract theoretical concepts to be dumped. Okay, they are practical. They want to see how this knowledge that you have transacted in the classroom can be used. Okay, can they do a project on it? Can they, real-time application, where is this particular, okay, principle going to come into application when I go? If I have learned, okay, even if I learn simple thing like about entropy, where is this knowledge required? When I go to work in a industry, if I am looking at the broiler, okay, sorry, looking at the boiler for temperature, pressure regulation, okay, they will always seek for some relevance. They will not like to learn something abstractly which has absolutely no connection to their real life. Real life needs applications or experience. And last but not the least, adult learners like to be respected. So that's what I was telling. What is your approach to your learners? Do you treat them as children? If you're going to treat them as children, what will you do? You'll be very didactic, very preachy in the way you conduct the session. If you think they are adults, you will treat them with regard, with concern, with respect. Okay, so adult learners like to be respected, as some of them were saying, that they treat them as a co-partner. Both of us are in the same endeavor. So, if you treat them with respect, if you treat them as adults, then they will behave responsibly. Okay? If you treat them as adults, they will be accountable to you. If you treat them with respect, they will behave like adults. If you treat them like children, they will behave like children. Okay? That is also setting expectations. Okay? So these are certain things. These are certain things that a teacher needs to keep in mind. You are dealing with 18 plus something and they are adults. They are intrinsically motivated. They look for relevance. They look for, okay, practical knowledge. Okay, they are goal oriented. They bring their own learning experiences to the classroom. Allow them to share them. And last, they want to be treated with respect. They like the teacher to treat them as their equals. And then they would like to behave responsibly. Reflect. What is your philosophy towards your students, towards your teaching? Do you think you're teaching a bunch of high school children? Do you think you're teaching a set of people who are adults, responsible, goal-oriented, looking for purpose in their learning? What is your approach? Okay? Are you getting it? Then that will make a difference. If you're going to treat them as adults, how are you going to? See, I have given you. What is your philosophy? Okay? Is your philosophy, how do you think as a teacher? Okay, if you saw yesterday's voice, there was this phrase, igniting the fire. So what is your philosophy towards teaching? Do you think the student is an empty bucket, empty vessel, and he's waiting to receive all that you're going to pour out in it? Is the student a receptacle or a bucket or a vessel waiting to be filled? Is that how you look at the students? Do you think, okay, that means, are you a person who only believes in transferring the knowledge? Do you think you are giving the student a shape? You are, okay, shaping the student's personality. You are shaping like a potter. Potter does, taking a mass of clay, a lump of clay and potting, okay, and shaping it. Do you think you are a potter, shaping the student's life, shaping the student's personality, shaping the student's career or future? What is your belief? With what belief do you go to the classroom? Do you think, look at the last two, do you think you are travelers? You are traveling, both of you. Okay, this is said by Plato. Plato said, the teacher should consider himself like a co-traveler to the student. Both of them are going on a journey, okay, in a certain direction to a place where the teacher has been before. Okay, the teacher has already visited that place and the teacher is guiding the student, hand holding and taking the student to a place the teacher has already visited and knows the path. So, are you going to treat your student like a co-traveler? Okay, both of you are going on a journey to a place, the road to which the teacher already knows. Is that your philosophy? Or do you think you are a gardener? Do you think you are a gardener? What is the role of a gardener? Tending a garden, nurturing a plant, giving it nourishment, sunlight, water, manure, okay, pesticide, whatever. So what is your feeling, okay, about your own teaching and what is your relation to your students? So educationists say that the last two philosophies are relevant to adult education. The first two philosophies are not so relevant to adult education because you are taking the role of a controller. Okay, teacher's role becomes a controller. If you are transferring the, okay, knowledge, it's an empty bucket, you are the controller. In the second one, if you are shaping, you are still the controller. Little more flexible than the first one, but still you are the controller. You are the one who is calling the shots, not the student. In the third and fourth, you are a guide, you are a gardener, you are an advisor. Okay? You are advising the student what you need. You need more sunlight, you need more manure, you need, okay, you need to go in this direction. Okay? These tendencies are not good in you, please weed them out. Okay? If you are taking the role of a gardener and a guide, you are playing a constructive role, and that is the role suitable for treating adult learners. Then students' role, if it is the first kind you are considering, they become passive. If you only think that you have to transfer the knowledge, they will become passive. They will wait for you to dump. In the second, they will be passive, but they know the outcomes. Okay, you are telling them, by the end of this course, this is what I want you to become. I want you to become very, very good at handling this lathe machine. You should be very skillful. Little more flexible, but they know the outcome. But still, the student is passive. It is still a one-way thing only. In the second one, active and reflecting. You are holding the student's hand. You are involving the student and learning is happening. And there is a reflective process involved. And the last one, if you are taking the role of a gardener, then you are allowing the student to make choices also. You are giving advice. You are only giving inputs and you are making it as a suggestion. You are not preaching him, you are not instructing him. So this is what Knowles, okay, talks about. Then the teaching learning process, okay, if our students are tertiary level learners, okay, they are engineering students, okay, ask this about your teaching learning process. When you go to the classroom, is the information transmission happening? Are they acquiring new skills, and are they applying the acquired knowledge and skills? Are these three things happening? If you believe your students are adults and they are budding professionals, in this case engineers, then are you using the right methods? That is the next question. If you believe that they are adults, if you believe that you are a gardener or you are a co-guide on a travel, what methods can you adopt? Are you using the right methods? And are all your students alike? When you go to the classroom, are all the 60 students sitting in the classroom alike? Attitudes, aptitudes, learning styles, are they all alike? Yes or no? Yes. How are they different? How are they different? That is going to be the next part of our discussion, so I want you to make some suggestions. How are they different? Their level of understanding, their areas of interest are different. Okay, fair enough. And? Okay, they would come from diverse backgrounds. Okay, they don't have common backgrounds, they come from different backgrounds in terms of, okay, yes. Concentration levels are different. Okay, their focus, their attention, their receptivity, okay, may be different. Some people may have longer hours of endurance. Some people may have short attention spans. Yes. Their area of interest may be different. Okay. Yes, they come with different, they may be at different stages of learning. Some may be at the level G, some may be still at the letter A, level A. Okay, so you have advanced learners, average learners, and, okay, poor. I wouldn't like to use the word poor, but little underprivileged learners. Yes. Yes? Some may be very professional, some may not be so professional. Very good. Professional approach, some may not have the professional approach. Some of them don't even understand that they are into a serious profession like engineering. They are training to become an engineer. Some of them treat very casually, like it's like any other arts course. Isn't it? Yes. So that consciousness, do they have that consciousness? Are they aware that they are equipping themselves to become, to join the profession of engineering? That consciousness is there in some, and in many it is not there. So yes, they are very different. Okay. So learners are different, they have different learning styles, different learning attitudes and approach. Okay, all of them are not alike. They come with different backgrounds, different preferences, different styles, they adopt different styles. Okay, for instance, we see all the time, it's a regular thing I discover with every batch. Okay, all the time we see there are three kinds of learners. One kind of learners who are excellent at mugging up things. Okay, you give them anything, they can learn it very quickly, they can reproduce it faithfully, and they pass the exams with flying colors. Okay, but they are superficial learners. Okay, they learn it, one day after the exam you ask them, they can't retain, they will not be able to answer any question, even the question which they attempted in the exam they won't be able to. Okay, so surface learners, superficial learners, they write, they study, okay, they retain it in the memory to the extent that it is required to produce in the exam. After that the mind is a clean slate. There are quite a good number of such students, okay, who are oriented, as we were discussing, only to write exams, pass exams and get, okay, high grades. They are tuned that way. We can't, okay, blame them. The kind of schooling system or plus 2 system they come from, the whole competition is to get higher and higher grades and more marks so that they can see their face on the front page of the newspaper when the results are out. Okay, you can't blame them. The education system is also geared up that way. So superficial learners who can learn fast, forget fast. Okay, they learn things only skin deep. They don't get into the core subject. Okay, then there are second kind of learners who are deep learners. Okay, they will not be sad, they don't care about the grades. Of course, if the grades come, okay, in the natural process, fine, but they care more about learning the subject. They grapple with the subject. They look up all kinds of books until they have understood it properly and they are in a position to use that knowledge and apply it somewhere, they will not be satisfied. So, such kind of learners are called deep learners. And there are third kind of learners, okay, which are also a sizable community, strategic learners. Okay, we see even such students here. So, they will learn some subjects only for getting marks. They don't believe in going deep into it. And some subjects which they feel, as we were discussing, they are adults. Some subjects which they feel is going to have a long-term impact on their career, they will learn with care and attention. Other subjects, they will just, even if they don't follow some key concepts, they will go in a superficial way. As long as they clear the exams and get a decent percentage, it doesn't bother them whether they have really thoroughly understood or not. But some subjects they will learn carefully, and they will also be careful about managing their grades. They are also interested in getting good grades. They will learn some subjects which they perceive as very important subjects, like IT and CSC students are very careful with how they learn programming subjects, because they know that their livelihood and their placements will depend on that. But other subjects, let's say they have another subject like management science or business principles or managerial economics. They have subjects like that which are not core subjects. They may go in a little slipshod way. They will just learn so much so that they can understand overall concept and then do well in the exams. So these three kinds of learners will be there even in your classroom. So learners have different needs, and we have to understand that they have different styles of learning. Then the question is, are we able to understand that and pitch our teaching to match those styles? Okay, this is a question we have to ask ourselves, and this is a question everyone has to ask as an engineer. So two engineers, Richard Felder and Linda Silverman, these two engineers, actually chemical engineers, they were professors in North Carolina University in USA. They have come out with a path-breaking discovery, and this paper is also available in the internet. Okay, this is a very, very popular article. Please read it, Google it and read it. They have come out with this article called Learning and Teaching Styles in Engineering Education. They are more concerned about the engineering pedagogy. This article is very useful to all budding teachers, especially in engineering education. So what Felder and Silverman say, they have come out with some startling findings. They have conducted extensive research in many engineering institutions in USA. Unfortunately, in India, there's not enough research going on engineering education. There are a lot of articles on school pedagogy, school education, but not enough on higher education. So I have taken this from, what we are going to discuss are the findings of Felder and Silverman. They were chemical engineers and who were talking about the learning styles. Why engineering graduates are not employable. Why they are not able to find placements after completing 4 years of the undergraduate program. The similar problem in the 1970s arose even in USA. The problem we are facing today. You might be hearing about things. that in Andhra Pradesh, India, NASSCOM came up with this report that 20% of engineering graduates are employable, rest are unemployable. There's no employment problem, but employability is a big problem. That is what industry specialists say. And in Andhra Pradesh, the unemployability is even higher. Okay, another organization called Purple Leap, which is also a think tank organization, which came up with the report that only 17% engineering graduates from Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, South India are employable. 17%. The rest are unemployable. Okay, so this problem arose even in USA. Okay, why engineers are not having the required skills when they come out of college campuses. And this article gets, even to this day, 1 lakh, minimum 1 lakh hits on the internet. Please read it in your spare time. So they undertook a series of surveys on engineering education. They posed 44 questions. They framed a questionnaire with 44 questions and distributed it across several campuses in USA. Okay, and collected a lot of data from the students on 11 dimensions to test the students about their learning preferences, to understand what are their learning preferences and whether in engineering colleges and universities those learning preferences are fulfilled. The students' expectations are fulfilled, and does the teaching happen to the students' level of understanding. Okay, and they posed 44 questions on 11 parameters, 11 dimensions. Some of the dimensions are, what kind of learning style do students have? Are they active? Are they active? Are they reflective? When we say active, those who like to learn things by doing, hands-on experience. Reflective, those who like to think through, who are involved in deep reflection, who are loners. These people like to do it in groups, these people like to do it in solitude. Dimension, another dimension, sensing, intuitive. Sensing means they are sensory learners. They want to feel things, they want to touch things. Okay, yesterday in the chairman sir's chamber there was a discussion. Chairman sir was asking the dean of academics and dean engineering, how many labs, what is the proportion of the lab versus the theory courses, and what are the number of hours. And because we are getting reports from the students, employers, especially those who are giving internships, that some students, some set of students, when they go to the industry, they are afraid to handle high-end equipment. Internship, we send them for 6 months internship. Some students have a phobia for machines. It's like a doctor who has a phobia to do an injection. Okay, that would be disastrous. So he was getting the feedback from the internship, the faculty who are monitoring the internship students, and they got this, that especially from electrical engineering, that some high voltage devices they don't know how to handle, so they are afraid. So the chairman sir was saying, can we do something about that? So he was saying every experiment should be repeated twice, thrice, till every student has handled the equipment. Please ensure that. And every student should take his or her own individual reading and not copy the readings, because we give the experiment in sets of 3 or 4. So while the reading is being taken, one student jots it down, the others simply blindly copy it. So he was saying that please ensure, tell all the faculty members who are handling the labs to see that the experiment is repeated twice, thrice, till every fellow knows how to handle it, how to connect a circuit, and so on. Okay, we are running out of time. So anyway, most of the learners are sensory. They want to feel, they want to handle the equipment, they want to have a practical feel of the subject they are learning. But are we allowing that to happen, or are we boring them with only abstract theories? And yes, so they want to have challenges in learning, some small problems which are given on which they can try their intellectual skills and then come out with a solution. So are we building enough challenges, enough opportunities for them to test and check out for themselves whether they are able to do problem solving, or are we simply feeding them with the solutions? These are things on which they tested them. And another dimension was visual verbal. Okay, most of us prefer to write, okay, lines and lines of notes on the board, but rarely do we carry a picture. Rarely do we show them a PowerPoint and show what the inside of a machine looks like. So majority of the learners prefer visual style of learning. They like to see things, feel things. They want to fix things, okay? And they like to, but what do we normally do most of the time? And many of them like to be verbal. They also want to contribute. They also want to share their ideas. They are visual, verbal learners. Sequential, global, okay? This was another dimension, another parameter. Do learners prefer sequential way of learning or global way of learning? Sequential means step by step, one after another, from simple to complex. Or do learners like to have a broader perspective? If I am teaching even a small cog, the design of a small cog in the wheel of a machine, do I tell them first, where does this cog, okay, fit into the larger structure of the machine? How does this cog contribute to the running of the machine? What is the design of the cog? Then I can go. Do I tell them, if I am talking about a particular part of the, discussing a particular part of the machine, do I tell them where it occurs in the whole scheme of things? Will the student be able to understand? Or do I simply tell them, okay, teach them in a compartmentalized or disconnected, disjointed way? So these are some of the parameters on which, dimensions on which they posed the questionnaire, and they came out with very interesting findings. Okay? Felder and Silverman came out with the findings that 57% of the learners in our classrooms are active learners. That means they want to be doing things, not simply listening. They are not auditory learners. They want to be doing, they want to handle, they want to learn, they want to, okay, come out with some solutions. 58% are sensing learners, sensory. They want to touch, feel, have a tangible, concrete experience of what they have learned. This is their finding. 87% are visual learners. Majority of them prefer to see. Okay, they would rather see a picture. A picture speaks for 1,000 words. What you can convey. So, they like to, for them things become clearer when they are able to see. So carry a picture, carry a teaching aid, show them the actual thing that you are teaching about. So 87% are visual and 56% are global. They want to have a larger perspective of the narrow content that they are learning. If I am learning this, we already discussed Knowles' adult principles of learning. Okay, I am learning about this cog, but what do I do with it? How is it going to be useful? What is the practical relevance? So they want to have the bigger picture in mind before they zero down and focus on one small component and learn about it. So this is what Felderman and Silverman say, Felder and Silverman. Another research, he is another math professor in New York College. So he says, okay, he gave another questionnaire in which among many other items, these were the 4 items of which he has much to say. He says that in a list of 10 questions, I haven't put all the 10 questions, but in a list of 10 questions given to the learners and to understand how they prefer teaching, a teacher to teach them, these 4 things, so he himself framed sentences and he gave them, and out of these 4 were ranked 1 to 4. These speak about the preferences, again a tertiary level learner. At the tertiary level, students said, we like logical progression of new material. We like it when a teacher does warming up, first tests our previous knowledge, tells us what we already know before introducing something new. And when he introduces something new, we like it when he makes it logical, connecting it to what we already know and build on that. So that they ranked as the highest out of the 10 questions given. Use of concrete and varied examples. They said that they prefer it when teachers give concrete examples, real-time examples, things which they can see, which they know, which they have experienced, to illustrate some concept or theory. They said that they like it when a teacher gives immediate and instant feedback. When they go to a teacher and ask, they like it a teacher who is responsive and gives them quick feedback. That they rated as 3. And fourth point on the list of priorities is they like it, they feel confident when the instructor knows the material. What does it mean? They like it when a confident teacher teaches them. Okay? So they feel confident when they feel that their teacher is the master authority on the subject. They don't like it or they are not so confident about the subject when they feel that the teacher is not sure about his or her own content. Okay? These 4 things have the strongest impact on their learning. And they rated these as the top 4 in their list. Okay, this is what students had to say about their preferences. Then what about the teachers? How did the teachers rank these out of the 10? Let's see. Those 4 things, okay, logical progression, known to the unknown, simple to complex, use of concrete, okay, giving prompt feedback and need to know the material completely and thoroughly. How did the teachers rank? They ranked the first one at 7. The second one, sorry, it's not 19, it is 9. The second one, 9. The third one, 3. And the fourth one, okay, 1. So both the teachers and students agreed that among the top 4, it is essential, okay, for a teacher to be confident and completely thorough with the knowledge he is imparting to the students. So then this explains the great divide, the huge gap that is there between the students' expectations and what the teacher's approach is. So whatever may be the stream or the domain in which the teacher is, okay, working, students expect this. This is what the students have to say. What do they have to say? They say examples of real life, industrial applications, illustrations, little bit of humor, practical situations makes the class more interactive and interesting. Not simply one-way traffic where the teacher is only giving theory and theory and theory and everything is abstract and going over their head. Okay, so this is very commonsensical when you think of it. When we were sitting on the other side, even we would have also preferred it this way. Reflect on who you think was your best teacher in your undergraduate or postgraduate level. I'm sure all of us will agree it. It's so commonsensical when you think of it. But we fail to keep this in mind when we go on the podium. When we go to the blackboard, we go with a totally different style. So anyway, this I'll skip. So anyway, one point, heavy dependence on theory at the cost of examples applications. Teachers don't spend enough time, okay, talking about concrete examples and applications. They go mostly, they give lot of abstract theory, and theory without connection to real life becomes very vague. It becomes very difficult to assimilate, okay, like heavy food that is hard on the digestion. So it has to be broken down, it has to be chunked, it has to be simplified, it has to be made familiar with good examples. So this is what students perceive. So you can motivate learning, okay, by helping the students to relate to the material, be inductive and be global. Okay, this is a suggestion for the teachers. Whenever you start a concept, start with an example. First give the example, then give the theory. Don't discuss the general principle first. Give an example. If you are talking about a wheel or a cog in the wheel, tell them, okay, what is the structure of a wheel? Have you seen a wheel? Can you tell me in which kind of machines do we use the wheels? In a watch? In an automobile? Where do we use the wheel? Ask them. Did you notice the structure of a wheel? How many kinds of wheels are there? Are there several sets of wheels which are interlocking? If they are interlocking, what is it that helps them to interlock? All these kind of things you can ask, general questions which makes the students feel stimulated to think about the topic you are going to introduce. So start with an example, be concrete in your examples, take from their examples from their everyday experience, even if it is a simple example, it's all right. It helps them to connect to the content you're going to teach and give them the larger perspective of what they are learning. We already discussed that they are goal driven, they are purpose driven, they look for relevance, they are practical. So tell them what you're going to teach is going to help them when they go to the industry to do these things. This is where they will be working on it if they choose this kind of job. Tell them what is the relevance of what they are learning. And then, yes, create as many experiences as possible for sensing, for touching, for working, for hands-on experiences. Okay? Make them activated. Allow them to share, allow them to do things, allow them to solve, give problem solving, give small projects. Create as many opportunities as possible for them to participate in the learning process. Okay, provide illustrations, examples, okay, give experiments, all these. We'll go a little fast, we are running out of time. So all these are the suggestions, okay. Do not fill every minute of the class time lecturing or writing on the board, okay. So I was trying to do it till I became conscious that I don't have enough time, okay. I was asking you a question to keep you activated. I was trying to involve you in what I was going to discuss, to trying to create interest and create curiosity to know what I am getting at by posing questions in such a way that you feel curious to know what I am going to tell you next. I did try it in the first half of the time. Then I looked at my watch, it was 3, so I accelerated my presentation a bit. You can do that in the classroom. Wherever possible, and keep it as a policy. After every 5 minutes, pose a question on what you covered in the last 5 minutes. Take a mind break for 1 minute, ask them a question, clarify whether they are listening. 1 or 2 people give the answer, then move on to the next 5 minutes. So in a class of 40 minutes, at least see that you pose 4 to 6 questions in the entire, at regular intervals. So this will make it interactive. And this will also keep the student attentive in the class. So do it as a regular practice. And then create opportunities where students can do something, problem solving, or taking a machine and showing them. It's very easy. I remember my +2 teacher, he used to bring vernier calipers, he used to bring a spectre, small devices which he could carry, and even while he was discussing the theory, now and then he would show it. Do you all see? Look at the structure, and then he would draw it on the board. So it was so easy. Okay, you're touching it, and then he would ask every one of us to handle it. He would bring one vernier caliper, circulate it to the whole class. Okay, for the over the class, all of us would have got to see what is the scale looking like. How do I move the teeth? Okay, so then when the board is already there on the blackboard, so I'm able to relate, and the rest of it becomes easy. So these kind of things, small devices which you can take, try to take it to the classroom, okay, give brainstorming sessions, okay, allow them to handle things, but don't reduce the entire class only to making notes. If they have to write, you are doing all the talking and the student is only writing, he will get disengaged from the learning. He will switch off his mind after 10 or 15 minutes. And all the effort goes in waste. So you can have some drill exercises. You can say, make it a ground rule. Say every day I'll teach for half an hour. After half an hour, I'm going to ask some questions on the last 30 minutes of lecture. All of you are going to answer the questions which I'm going to pose. Have a opening instruction at the beginning of your semester and follow it meticulously. So students will know, okay, I better be careful. I must be attentive. The teacher may pose a question. If I'm not able to answer, then he may give me some tougher task or something like that. You can make certain ground rules for your class. And last, this is the last slide. I think I have kept the time. So when you're talking about learning styles, learning preferences, these kind of things are not known to the students. Many of us also don't know it unless we actually look for it and start trying to look at it from that angle. So talk to the students about the learning styles. Ask them which is the best time of the day for you to learn. How do you normally learn? Do you do it in group work, or do you learn better when you study on your own? Do you like it when you go to the lab and experiment with what you have studied, or do you like you are able to also visualize without doing the lab work? Help the students, give a general talk to the students about different kinds of learning styles. You can be a good friend and advisor to them. Tell them that, see, if you're not able to learn a subject, you're facing some difficulty, it may not be because of your inadequacy. You are not poor in skills, or you are not poor in understanding capacity. It may be because you are not using the right style of learning, or your style of learning is different from what you are adopting. Explain it to them, and when you are able to advise them on their learning style and help them to identify their own learning preferences, that would be the best help you can give them as a teacher. And you will see very, very productive output from the students once you help the students to understand what is their style of learning. And if they are active learners, encourage them to do group work. If they are reflective learners, tell them, see, group work will not work for you. You go home every day and review your notes and read a book. You are not the kind of person who is going to learn through group work. You ask them, how do you learn, reflect, how in school and college, when did you do best in your exams? What kind of, when you did group study or when you did individual study? Did you learn more through the labs, or did you learn more through theory? Ask them, they will be able to share information and you can guide them. So that is the best style you can, or best help you can give to them. So explain to them how they can learn efficiently, which is an important step in managing their learning. And once you give them guidance on it, they will show more commitment to learn also. You can expect some commitment. They will bind with you and they will say, yes, we will try this method since you suggest it. And they will feel very, very happy with you if you are able to guide them not only on the subject knowledge but also on the approach or the style in which that subject can be mastered better. So on this note, so please, this is for all types of learners, whether intuitive, whether sensory, whether reflective, all kinds of learners can be guided on how to identify their own learning styles and ask them to test and try, okay, till they have arrived at some understanding about their own learning preferences. If we can do that, we can expect very good improvement in their performance. So thank you all. With this, I'll close the session. If you have any questions, you can ask.